There are 1,000,010 great video coaches. There are 1,000,010 great travel creators or whatever it is. But what's going to stand you apart is you actually being in your content. So I think the sooner that you can embrace it in your strategy, the sooner you're going to be able to see better results with how you're showing up.
Hi, travel creators. Welcome to this very exciting episode of the podcast. I have here someone I have been fangirling over. Okay, I've been on her email list for a long time, and she has incredible video advice for all of my creator friends. I'm so excited for you to hear more from Natasha.
So I'm Natasha of Shine with Natasha. So I do a few different things with my business. The first is really teaching creators and small businesses how to use original video content to grow their brands. I also am a creator myself. So I have a podcast, YouTube, Instagram, and my own content presence with lots of video tips. And then I also have a done for you agency. So with my agency, we do done for you video content management, events, and shoots for creators and small businesses.
That's so freaking cool because it's so needed. Like, I don't think people realize how vital the video content is. And that's one thing I wanted to talk about for sure is I feel like especially people who are creators or even they are aspiring creators and they have just been told through the grapevine or just from consuming content that everything is about video, or like it seems that way. From your perspective, why do you feel as though video is so impactful? And not just because that's what Instagram wants us to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to your point, I think video is definitely having a moment. It's been having a moment since stories blew up, and then there was IGTV, and then YouTube was having a moment, and then everyone was watching lives in COVID, and then of course short form video, right? So I think it can feel like we're in a video era, but I think it's really important to know that video has always been one of the top types of content and marketing assets that people can be creating. And I always like to describe video as like a vital part of our content strategy because you get the vibes from video. You're able to see how someone talks. You're able to see movement. You're able to hear sound. You're able to get all of those visual dynamic elements all in one piece of content. And obviously people listening to podcasts, I love podcast audio. I love a good feed post or carousel. I love a good email or blog post, but you're only consuming one type of content with that. And with video, you're able to get a lot of different elements, which means you're able to build more connection, build more community, and really create content that's just a lot more interesting and engaging for people to consume.
Think about any band, any author, any sort of these little cults that we follow. What if we didn't follow them? Or like if these little micro cults didn't have faces attached to them, would we be as obsessed with them as we really are? And your face also is brand recognition, but you can't grow, I think, quickly if you don't show the internet in some capacity who you are. And for some, they choose the video route, which I obviously agree with Natasha and think is the way to go to show their faces and help people trust them. I mean, when you think about it, video just makes sense. It's like the easiest way to understand somebody's vibe, what they're like, and really figure out if you know, like, or even trust them. That's so true. I don't really think about that. That made me think of, and something I run into a lot with people is, especially creators who haven't done a lot of video before, is that they don't want to, or they don't, it's just like a barrier, a mental barrier of having their face online. And there's like a whole laundry list of things I say to people about it. But what do you say to creators either that you work with or are trying to mentor or literally coach them into getting their face out there? What do you say to them to get through their head?
Yeah. I think it's first important to acknowledge that it's definitely hard and uncomfortable because it's new. So, like, holding space for that and knowing that looking at your face back in your camera and editing content with your face in it, it's going to bring up all of our biggest insecurities in the places that we're not confident because we're being visible in that way. But I think it's really important to know that you can't really build a community if people don't know you, if people don't actually feel like they're connected with you. And there are 1,000,010 people doing what every single one of us are doing in our niche. There are 1,000,010 great video coaches. There are 1,000,010 great travel creators or whatever it is. But what's going to stand you apart is you actually being in your content. So I think the sooner that you can embrace it in your strategy, the sooner you're going to be able to see better results with how you're showing up. And the great thing about videos, there's lots of different ways that you can be visible. If talking doesn't feel natural for you, there's other ways that you can do it. Maybe you can lean into B-roll or other creative ways. So you can lean into your strengths, but I think being in your content is definitely a non-negotiable.
I think so too. What are your thoughts on this faceless marketing?
Oh, don't get me started. I actually recorded an entire podcast, YouTube video on it that's been like going off on YouTube on people's videos that are promoting faceless content. So to say YouTube is being petty there is an understatement. So maybe we could share that in the show notes if you want to hear my
Yes.
full rant. But I honestly think it's really preying on what I think a lot of people's insecurities are. Is they're like, I don't want to be in my content. So this feels like a quick fix. This feels like the solution. But at the end of the day, the people that are promoting faceless content as like the best new way to go viral and grow are only growing because they're promoting it as the sexy, hot new thing. That's why they're growing. It's like a cycle, right? So it's not going to work for your brand because you're not promoting faceless content. And so, yeah, I think that does your face need to be plastered in every single piece of content you create? No. But do I think you should avoid your face actually being in your content? I definitely think that no, that does not actually make it easier. In fact, I think the aesthetic faceless videos are actually harder to create when you really put it that way. So yeah, I think it's a gimmick. I think it's a trend, and I think it's not the best way to create a brand long term.
I totally agree with you. And I will say it. I feel like the people who are promoting faceless marketing as this amazing thing are the same people who are like, I just sold this digital product overnight and now I have $90,000 and here's this reel of how you can do it too. Those people in my mind they're the same. They're the same.
Yeah.
And it is crazy. And I think you're right because it does feel like the easy way out. And like there are a million ways to make your content easier, but you just have to be a part of it. You have to be a part of what you're doing. This also makes me think of viral/trending videos. I will die on the hill that they are not going to help you secure your target audience, at least in the long term, because my perspective is, and I would love to hear yours because this is more of your niche. My perspective is that if somebody has this video that goes viral and it pops off, the chances of it drawing in people who are actually a part of their target audience are so slim. And it's like, cool, now you have so many more followers, but are they actually the ones that you want? Are they actually the ones that are going to do anything for you? And I think people get so caught up in oh, but here's this like super easy trend I can do. And like, I'm not a villain to trendy content, but I think anything has to be done in doses. So I'd love your opinion on what you think about viral/like trendy video content.
I think right now in this day and age, you do not need it to grow. And I think that's what a lot of people think is that this is the best way to get new eyeballs. It's the best way to grow. This is the best way to increase your reach. There are so many other ways that any platform that has trending audio will get your content in front of new people. So that's the first thing. I think that trends, if you feel inspired, if it helps you feel creative, if it like gives you a landing point, go for it. But if you rely on it for 100% of your content, you at the end of the day you're not the expert at your content now. You're looking to trends. You're always researching. You're always trying to do what's trending. And that can be really exhausting. And it actually makes it harder to create because you have to post the trend when it's trending, right? So you're constantly looking, you're constantly having to crank out content while it's trending so you can get the benefits of the trend. And then at the end of the day, are you ever even ideating and leading your own strategy, your own ideation? And so I think, does it work? It can work. Sure. Is it going to get you in front of the wrong people? It definitely could, to your point. But I also think it's not the easiest way and it's not the best way to grow an audience. So I almost solely don't use trends for my content. Of course, if I'm posting something where I'm putting an audio on top, if I see it's trending arrow, sure. And I like the song, sure, go for it. But I'm doing it as a bonus. I'm not doing it as the starter for my content.
I could say a lot of things about trendy content. Okay. And sometimes I feel like it can be the high road when you just want to post because you feel like you have to post rather than finding the time or creating the content system to create a piece of content that actually will do more for you in the long run rather than just attracting a whole bunch of people into your audience who are probably not there for the right reasons. Just like The Bachelor. It's literally the same. But if you want to know more about how I feel about trendy content, I actually have an entire episode dedicated to this that you can go and check out. Okay. I'll list you a couple of other thoughts I have and we can see which one sparks you. Okay. What makes a good video, or like the anatomy of a good video? Like when you as an expert see a piece of content or consume content, what makes you stop and be like, ooh, that was well done. That was a good piece of video. I love that.
Yeah, definitely. I think it, first of all, starts with like the concept or the idea, because you could have the best edits, you could have the best footage, you could have all of those things in line. But if the idea and the concept itself isn't compelling to your ideal person you're trying to reach and highly relevant and interesting and engaging, then it's never going to do well, no matter how many bells and whistles you put on it. The next thing is really your footage. And I don't mean that you have to have a fancy camera and a lighting setup and a really advanced microphone to create great video content. But is the framing good? Is it well lit and not super dark where I can't even see you? Is the audio so echoey that like it's like bouncing back and forth, right? And even when we think of B-roll, is there movement? Is there too much movement? Like, is there a really great visuals, no matter what format you have, is really important, because a lot of people focus on the edits, but you can't edit great content if you don't have great footage. That actually leads to great edits. So that's something really important that I think a lot of people miss out on. And then really from there, it is having like a really strong hook. In those first few seconds, whether I'm reading text, whether I'm watching video clips, whether you're saying something to me, do I know why I should care about this video? Do I know what I'm going to get out of this video? Do I know why I should keep watching and why I should care? And that is the most important thing. It's actually funny. Before I hopped on this, I was reviewing a bunch of reels. I'm like a juror for this Reels award show, which is very fun and very niche and specific. The Reelies, if anyone wants to look into it on Instagram. And I was voting on tons, like hundreds of videos. And literally some of them I would just scroll past because in the first few seconds, they did not draw me in. It wasn't engaging. It wasn't interesting. I didn't know what it was about. So I wasn't going to vote it as one of my top videos, like automatically off the bat. And I know that seems harsh, but that's what people are really up against when they see so much content on their feeds. And so I think really honing in on your idea, your footage, and your actual hook is really important. And at the end of the day, that's really just like the structure of your video. Like as you're building the building pieces and adding the different layers onto your video, it's everything purposeful, it's everything making sense to really give people the best experience with your content.
What makes a good video for travel content creators is something we will dive more into on this podcast, but I think it's always going to be an evolution. But it will always come back to being good at storytelling. That's the basis of just about everything you will do in marketing. So if you can nail storytelling and know exactly who you are trying to tell a story to, then your videos will win. Yes. I mean, hooks, of course, are people's attention spans, as we know, are not made for you to have shitty hooks. They're just not. Where do you turn people to get inspiration? Because we have to have, like you said, a good idea to start. So if somebody came to you and they're like, I don't know what to do, I feel like I would tell them to look inward at like what content you like to consume is probably content you like to create. But what would you tell someone when they are trying to hunt for good video ideas?
Yeah, I definitely think like looking for inspiration is a great place to start. I think another one is like getting really clear on just like your overall strategy. So for all of my clients, I always recommend having content pillars. Essentially, they're just like common themes and topics you're going to be touching on in your content. I find around five is like the sweet spot. And from there, once you have your content pillar set of like what you're an expert at and some personal touch points and like all of those pillars set on these very specific topics, you can actually use those to generate ideas, which is a really great way to sit down with your content pillars and just go through and brainstorm a bunch of ideas because you know those pillars are really related to your niche, your industry, and they're made with your ideal follower in mind and really what they're going to be interested in. So I think focusing on your strategy is also really helpful. And also just like experimenting. I think the more we leave space for play and creativity and fun in your content, the more you're going to get inspired and get new ideas. I love to look to my own audience, even if you have a small one, of like what's resonating in the analytics, what questions are people having, what are people replying most to on your stories, because chances are you already have some of that data that you just need to lean into and create more content on. Like even yesterday, I posted a video about how to create a video dump, and I saw people commenting of like, oh, I get really overwhelmed with blogs. This is a great alternative. I'm like, okay, well, I will do a video on how to make blogs easier, right? So I'm like using my audience to kind of inspire that new idea. And I think a lot of us can do that. And that's always the best way to create for your ideal follower.
Yeah, I think the thing I keep repeating to everybody is that the most powerful thing I've ever done is just ask people what they want or what are they struggling with or where in your expertise can you help somebody else or like what is easy for you that is hard for somebody else and you can answer that through your expertise, which has been wildly helpful for me. But when you're looking at video analytics, what do you look at that you're like, this makes me know this was a good piece of content? And I know it is platform specific. You could pick one if you wanted, but what makes for good video analytics?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's important to start by using yourself as a benchmark, right? Like, how many followers do you have? Like, what are your average numbers? Because I think if you compare yourself to someone that has 100 million followers, like, you're always going to be unhappy with the results. So, making sure you understand your own benchmark. But things that I like to look at are comments and replies on things like stories and videos. And more importantly, I like to look at like, what are people asking? Like, what's resonating? Like, where are those conversations leading? I think are really, really valuable. Another one is, of course, like profile visits, follows, website clicks, especially if you're selling things like digital products for your creator business. And really just like saves and shares are also a metric that I really value. If someone finds it really valuable and they're sharing it with a friend or they're saving it for later, that's a really great indicator to the algorithm that they should push that content out to more people. So those are definitely some metrics that I like to look at. Of course, like views and how many new followers I'm getting, it's always great. But at the end of the day, it always depends on kind of the goal that we're setting strategy on.
As this is coming to your ears, an episode is out on CTAs, some of the best that I've seen in travel creator spaces. And you can go ahead and go over there and steal some of those and tweak to your niche. Let me know how that goes. I think the analytics that really should matter to you will align with your goals. For example, if your goal is to grow your community, your analytics you probably want to pay attention to are comments and shares. But if you're more just like, I just want to get the face value vanity, build up the trust, then likes and reach are probably most important to you. I personally look for reach and I look for saves, especially in educational content, because that tells me people are feeling something from this and they want to save it enough to come back to later. They're just like bookmarking it to come back to later. Tips you have for creators batching videos. I know there are so many ways you can go about it, and I'm sure it also depends on the strategy that you're taking. One, like my target audience, they have camera rolls brimming with amazing B-roll of all of these places they have visited. And their pain point is trying to, one, keep it organized. It's just overwhelming, the quantity.
Yeah.
And being able to sit down and look at their computer and be like, okay, where do I even start? How should I even batch all this B-roll content? Any tips you would have for people who have an overwhelming amount of B-roll and they want to create content from it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing is to organize your footage. The easiest way is with folders on your camera roll. So for every location or every day on a trip or whatever it is, like even concepts for a video, like go ham with the folders because that's going to allow you to like see your content a lot more easily. The other thing is to implement something like a content day. I often think we leave content to those in between moments and we don't prioritize it as like all the other parts of our day. But it's important to have a reoccurring time that you're sitting with your content and you're doing very specific tasks. I usually recommend 1 to 3 tasks. And the task is not let's batch reels. It's outline 3 reel ideas. It's edit those 3 reel ideas. It's schedule a month of content. It's organize all of my B-roll. It's very specific, so you know exactly what to focus on. And really from there, I would also recommend you plan out very clear concepts and ideas, ideally before you're maybe going on a trip or doing something like that. But you also can do it afterwards of like, maybe there's a routine. It's every time I'm returning from a trip or travels that I was on, I'm going to set some time to go through my camera roll, to brainstorm 5 ideas and to put it in a content calendar. So I have some accountability. So I think just staying on top of those tasks, staying organized, and giving an idea and a concept to the B-roll that you have will help you have a starting point because of course, it's really easy to get overwhelmed with all the ideas, but at the end of the day, you kind of just got to like pick one and start posting it, knowing you can always go back to that footage because it's organized.
Totally. Absolutely. One thing I've on my like dream list of my life is to create a sort of software where that organizes creator footage because it is a hot mess. I work with people who use Google Drive. I work with people who have added me to their Apple Notes thing, Dropbox, you name it, it's used and a hot mess. And I have yet to find a solution. I was like, I can't find a solution, so I'm just going to figure out how to create one. But like, there's just no fantastic way to organize the physical files. Is there something that you do? I guess, of course, the external hard drive route is obviously going to have to be essential considering the quantity of content, especially people in my target audience have, just because they're just constantly getting more of it. But is there something that you use or recommend people use to organize their files?
Yeah, it's a loaded question, and I wish I had one perfect tool, but I always tell people it's the tool that you'll actually use.
Yeah.
Airtable, Asana, Trello, Google Sheets, ClickUp, Notion. There are 1,010 tools, and all of them can work if you actually like using it. So that's always my recommendation. I literally have clients that use all the above, and it's at the end of the day picking what works for them and really building it out where it has all the fields and features and views that are going to help you actually use it. Because I think a mistake people run into is they see this one creator that finds a lot of success using Notion and how they have their Notion set up, but then they go into it and their brain just doesn't work that way. So I think sometimes you have to start by like, what tools do I maybe already use? Like when I go into it, it's a vibe. And what is my actual workflow? What do I need to store? What do I need to plan? What do I need to organize? What are the steps of my workflow? And then I use that to build a content calendar.
I think people get caught up in the shiny new, they get targeted by ads, speaking from experience, of like, I'm going to go download this fun new thing, and then you use it and it's trash because it's like, this is not working for me. So you go back to what you're doing before, and then you start the whole cycle again of like, is this really working? So it's just a matter of figuring out, what do I need this thing to do for me? What am I trying to do? And what can do it for me? Even if it's a Google Sheet, I could never, but
yeah,
it's possible. It's possible. I think one of the biggest mistakes creators make is not organizing their files or their content or really anything like that. I am a lover of Asana. I'm a lover of Google Photos, and I've worked with clients who use anything under the sun. But if there is something you're already using that is working for you, just use it. Just stick to it and use it, and it will make your life so much easier in the long run. But I would also say, don't go back and organize all of your photos and videos now. Just start now and organize them from now into the future. Like, I'm not saying don't spend a month of your life going back to organize 3 years of traveling videos. That's insane. That's a good thing to do if you are on an airplane, for sure. You can make that a priority. But just start now and pick something that works for you. One of my very first episodes of this entire show is how to create a content organization system that you'll actually freaking use. So you can head over there to get my best tips. What are some that you see maybe your clients in the beginning when they start working with you and you're like, you're just really making this simple mistake in your videos, and if you change this thing, you would be far better off? That's probably a hard question to answer, but I challenge you.
It's a really good one. I definitely would say hooks are probably the biggest one, which I know we've already touched on. And I think the other one really would be not knowing your audience, which I know has been a common theme. So hopefully that's like helpful and reassuring of like, you probably already have all the puzzle pieces. I will say the other one that's very creator specific is just being repetitive with your content. I think a lot of people overthink like, oh, well, I went on this trip 5 months ago, so I can't post this content, or I already posted about it once, so I don't want to be annoying, or oh, I want to like create this new shiny idea. Like I need to find new ideas. I need to find new ideas. But honestly, the best creators are being repetitive with their content. They're creating reoccurring series. They're talking about the same thing. They're using the same format that worked over and over again, and they're just updating and tweaking it versus always trying to reinvent the wheel.
Yes. A quote I keep coming back to is, everything that has already needed to be said has been said, but you just have to say it again because nobody was listening. And I did a podcast episode like many moons ago on why my hot take is that there's no original ideas, and how the premise is really your best ideas are ideas that you have already had, and you just need to go back and look at them again, or just re-ideate on them. And really in the sense of this, it gets meta, but I'm not like weird. I don't know, wooey like that. But in terms of content, I believe that's true of like, okay, this piece of content worked for you. Whatever you wanted to find worked as, fine. But there's something in it that you can come back to and share with your audience again. Because essentially we're just like screaming into the void of the internet, and we hope that 3 people see it and remember it. And you're so right. I work with so many people who are like, well, I can't share about that because I already did. And it's like, well, that's a fantastic problem to have, because you already feel confident in what you've said before. So let's say it again, because it's working for your target audience. And that is such a powerful thing, I think, when people realize that. And then it also takes some of the pressure off of the constant content creation, because it can get so overwhelming and it can get so exhausting, especially if somebody's trying to hunt down all these trends to come up with new ideas to fit them. It's like, you already have everything you need to create the content. You just need to do it again. Blows my mind. Okay, I am experimenting and asking several different people some of their like icks of social media that you see people do, and you're like, what would you say are some of your biggest icks, or like things that you see on social media that you're like, this is not, we can't be doing this?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is probably people like going back to hooks, people like having a hook that like they would never say to a person, of like, oh my gosh, stop your scroll. And I've never said that to a human in real life. So I think like picking hooks that like just sound like you're talking to someone. I think that's definitely something that is always kind of a turn off when I see it in content.
I think that's so true. And especially lately, I've been reminded of, or at least trying to remind in my content, that if social media is community-based, and it's so easy to get away from that, especially if you are somebody who has something to sell or wants to sell something or is trying to learn how to do any of those things, it's so easy to remove yourself from the community aspect of it when it's counterintuitive, because you're trying to build an audience in a community, but yet you're like not engaging with them or speaking to them like you would anybody or a friend. And I think that is lost a lot, especially sometimes in the creator space. And I feel like some creators do it really well. It's like a hard spectrum in my mind. Some people do it really well, and other people are just completely ignoring the people that exist to them. And sometimes I feel like there's no awesome in between. People are either doing it or they're not. There are a lot of icks out there that I personally have, and perhaps I'll create an episode dedicated to that, about what I see content creators doing that I'm like, let's not do this. Besides that, I think the biggest thing creators can do is just be human. Let us not forget, social media was created to be social and to create a community, and it's the least we can do to sit down and nurture that community. We're always focused on building more and more, yet we forget that the people who are in our community right now are the ones who are going to help us grow to that future level. So we have to take care of the people in our little neighborhood. Do you feel like it depends on niche? But I know I've seen a lot of advice of using visual hooks as well as on-screen text, which I guess is visual, but also if you're doing a voiceover or something like that. Do you think to have a really strong video, it needs both of those things? Or is one better than the other?
Yeah, there's 3 different types of hooks, which I have a whole deep dive episode on that might be like a helpful like continuation. But I think with all 3 hooks that I'm going to like cover, I think if you have all 3, great. If you have 2, great. If you just have 1, great. It definitely is going to depend on your content, and you want to make sure you're making each hook that you're including as dynamic as it can be. So of course we have what you're saying. So you're talking to camera, you have a voiceover. What are you actually saying in those first few seconds that's going to draw people in and be a hook? That's one type of hook. The next one is really like the visuals of it, right? Of maybe there's movement, or maybe there's like an effect, or maybe there's something that like draws you in and makes things really visually interesting. And then kind of that last one is text, which can really be supportive for something like a talking video or a voiceover or a vlog to give that extra context. But also sometimes if you're just using B-roll and adding text, your text is the hook. That is the entire video. So yeah, I think focus on the hooks or hook that makes the most sense for your type of content and really optimizing it and using them together when it makes sense.
This is a moment in this episode where you need to hit that little 15-second rewind button. Okay, it's there. It's there for a reason. Now is the time to use it. All of these different 3 types of hooks from Natasha, the video queen, is going to help you and not hurt you. And there are a million different ways we can use these 3 different kinds of hooks. So I encourage you to take about 15 minutes, maybe 10, maybe 5 if you're fast, to go back, listen to these hooks, and figure out a way you can use them in your content. That's awesome advice. I try and tell people to go study some hooks of creators you admire and see what they're doing and how you can apply it to your own niche. And I also tell people, study creators you admire, and when you're scrolling yourself, see like what gets you, like what stops you from your scrolling, or like what. I just did similar research on calls to action, and my advice was similar of when you're clicking on the targeted ad to buy the product you don't need, what was the call to action and how can you emulate that in your own content? So it really, when we think about it like that, it kind of boils down that you just need to study what other people are doing, or the success of your niche is almost hiding in plain sight. You just need to figure out how to apply all of these pieces to what will work for you and your audience, which is a fun challenge in some days. Some days it is not. Thanks everyone for tuning into this incredibly valuable video-based episode of the podcast. I'm so excited to create even more content from this and see how you use it as well. Let me know on Instagram at Travel Content Writing what you thought of this one. If you want even more from Natasha, she is just an incredible artist at what she does here. I would head on over to shinewithnatasha.com/challenge. We'll leave that linked below for you. But basically, it's an entire little mini challenge to help you learn the simple strategies that will cut your video content creation time in half. Happy creating. I'll see you next week.